It's
Has
happening.
started.
It has.
I didn't vote for this.
Not my stream. XD.
Hashtag not my stream. Dude, CG is so good.
Oh
Yes.
wait, it's they're playing, right?
Oh my god, they just got crushed game 1 and then they just. Okay, my bad. I'm so excited. I'm excited.
Yeah. It's good games.
Good.
So
I'm gonna keep it on mute. Just so you guys know, I am listening to you guys, but
gotcha.
Yes, I'm going to do the same, so I think that's fair.
Fair enough. I guess I'll do it too. XD.
Yeah.
on another note, let's talk about the peak applications for Team Liquid.
All the talk about
All the talk. Yeah. So the chapter this particular week was Principles of Deliberate Practice in Everyday Life.
Mhm.
So, to open up, I want you guys to tell me about your everyday life this week. Let's go.
No.
See, the problem with this is that you're assuming that I have an everyday life.
Same.
Fair enough.
So, at work, I do deliberately practice. I try. I find that oftentimes, if I try to do deliberate practice at work, then my sales performance goes dramatically down, which kind of sucks. So I try not to do it too much. But because what happens is I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try this new line of script for a script that I'm thinking about. Let's see how it goes, and then because it doesn't feel comfortable or good at the time, it just completely kills my sales because the customers, they can kind of tell when you're not being genuine. When you're reading off of a list or something.
Yeah.
And so it's it kills your sales until it gets good, and then once it gets good, then your sales go back up, right? But the problem is that it's a performance-based job, so it's almost like the Air Force One problem, where it's you can't really deliberately practice on the job because you'll fucking die, right? So it's I have to figure out how to get that deliberate practice in when I'm off of work, so I can go to work and focus only on performing well. I don't feel like I have that problem with League. I feel like with League, when I'm deliberately practicing in League in a ranked game, I actually feel like I'm already playing better, right? So it's there's a difference there for me for some reason. And it's unless it's something that's I'm really bad at, if it's a completely new skill, say, oh, I need to buffer my autos, then that feels really bad, and I'm really bad and I have to practice that in a normal game or in practice tool. But for the most part, I'm able to deliberately practice in-game and not really impact my performance.
That probably has to do with whether you're solidifying or whether you're actually training a new skill. You know what I mean? If you're going from conscious competence to unconscious competence, then yeah, it's pretty easy to do it in the middle of performance.
On the job, yeah.
If you're actually trying to learn something new that you can't do before, which is kind of what the authors are all about, right? They're all about that gap between conscious incompetence and conscious competence. Then yeah, obviously your performance is going to suffer because you're trying to do something you can't do. That's literally the point, right? So,
right, but so to say that the funny thing is that when it comes to a sales job, an acting script, for example, and the thing is that I don't want to say that I'm acting because I don't try to act. I try to be as genuine as possible when I'm doing the salesman job. But when I'm deliberately practicing a new aspect of a script, where I'm I need to tighten this up a bit. I need to cut this down a couple of words and cut it down a few seconds. When I had another script already in unconscious competence, I have to bring it out to conscious competence, and then it stops being genuine. So it's for me, for that, it still is solidifying and changing things, but it's not a brand new thing, which is why it's confusing me.
I think the thing that's more unusual is that you don't feel that in League. I think that the experience that you're having at work sounds like the norm, and League sounds like some kind of a weird exception.
Yeah,
and it might just be
a weird feeling when I'm changing something up in League. So yeah, can confirm.
That you don't, or you do?
I do.
I also know that when talking with Sam, that a lot of my skills in League, whether or not they're good or bad skills, insofar as they're the correct skill, the way to do the skill, or the wrong way to do the skill, they're pretty much always unconscious competence. Like, I for some reason, things for me go through conscious competence, I think, relatively quickly compared to other people, as far as, like, for some reason, habits just build really fast. And so, like, I built the wrong habits several times in League and have had to go back and relearn them. Whereas if I just maybe know what I needed to learn right at the way, maybe it would have been easier. But now, for me, it's like most of these habits, I'm not learning new skills. I think I'm kind of bringing old skills back to conscious competence and relearning them, which is maybe the distinction there. Or maybe it's just that, like, I do feel that way. I just don't notice that I feel that way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be true. I mean, I think that's probably the more likely explanation, because when I think about bringing conscious competence from unconscious competence, I do the same thing at work. So why would it feel differently? It could just be that I don't realize that I'm feeling that way in the moment.
It may also be a matter of engagement, which is the second category in this particular chapter. Is one thing that I'm thinking. So, let's get into the material, shall we? Delia, unless you have something to share from your immensely boring French life.
No, well, I haven't been doing much. Eat, League, fucking get late on my fucking report that I need to be sending tomorrow and that I won't.
Oof.
Oh, geez, I thought you said got laid, and I was like, hell yeah, boy, that's my boy.
No, that was last week. Getting laid was last week, so...
Oh, that's my boy, dude, good job.
XD.
And now she's in another country, so please, my soul is hurting.
Sorry, dude.
It's all good. No, and then I just hung out with some friends that I hadn't seen in a while, so,
Sounds like a fulfilling week.
Yes, it was.
Sweet.
But, yeah, my week was just go to work, come home, think about League.
Yep. And we're skipping my week because y'all know how that went.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So, to get into the chapter, the first thing that so the kind of major topic of the whole chapter is how do you apply the principles of deliberate practice in just anything that you'd like to kind of get better at, not necessarily your profession, but just whatever it is that you find interesting. And his first piece of advice is to find a good teacher, right? And he spends a little bit of time talking about what a good teacher might look like, right? One of the things that he mentions is that you want to find somebody who's not necessarily like the best in the world, per se, but who is accomplished in the field in some way, right? To quote, generally speaking, teachers will only be able to guide you to the level that they or their previous students have attained. And I think this is roughly accurate, you know what I mean? And it's very important that he uses the word generally, right? There are exceptions to this rule. There are people who, obviously, right? Like, the person who got their students above where they themselves got, before they did that, they hadn't gotten their students above the level that they were. You know what I mean? So it's like, there it is, right? But, if you're looking for a decent idea of how good a coach is right now, looking at their current rank and looking at their students' current ranks are going to give you reasonable indicators of what kind of coaching they're capable of. The second thing that I noticed that he said to kind of look out for is that they should have experience actually teaching in the field, not just performing, right? And he says to look at what students have to say about them who were with them in the past and then, or who are working with them now. And also make sure that they have good practice exercises that you can do on your own, as opposed to only the ability to, point out mistakes, but then not really give you any way to work on it, yeah? So, did you have any particular thoughts in this section, or?
Not really. I mean, I liked it all. I mean, it didn't seem too mind-blowing, really. Like, oh.
I didn't think so either. It's just sort of like, yeah, I mean, it's all the same stuff, right?
Yeah. It turns out if you're good at teaching, good things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, well, all right.
I think it's,
sure.
I mean, I think that it does do a, maybe the one good point that we can bring up related to League is, you don't necessarily need the best in the world to be a good teacher, right? Like, if somebody's challenger and they're, like, selling their coaching, but they're a terrible coach, you won't learn that much, right? So,
But on
a
the
lot
flip
of
side,
people pay tons and tons and tons and tons of money for people who are challenger to coach them and get very little benefit out of it.
I think on the flip side, I think he is trying to, maybe put a little caution into the wind, where it's like, just because, they're good teacher doesn't mean they can get you to be the best in the world.
No, decidedly not.
Generally, where it's like, a coach like you might be able to get someone to master tier.
Sure.
But maybe not somebody necessarily get somebody to the top of the challenger ladder, which is, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on a sec.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's about accurate.
And I'm not saying that you're a bad coach or anything. I think you're a fantastic coach, but, like, there's just that, like, it's just, like, it'd be really hard to, I guess, because, according to what he said, at least, it's like, without having gone through the experience, it's difficult. But then you also see, like, NFL coaches who have never played in the NFL specifically who are able to coach NFL teams. So it's like,
Yeah.
But also, at the same time, football is a much more developed field where, like, probably NFL coaches who used to play in the NFL probably went and created, like, this is how you coach the NFL teams. And then they go and create their own methodology around that, something like that, right?
Yeah. It's a lot easier to... Yeah, I mean, football is a more established field. So, yeah, I think the less developed a field is going to be, the more and more important it is to have somebody that's got an understanding of what makes the best play so well, right? That's really kind of the determiner of how far a coach will be able to take you, right? It's like, if they know what makes the best so good, then that's what allows them to pass that information on to you and help you to develop those same sorts of skills, right? If they don't know what makes the best as good as they are, then, they can assist in purposeful practice, but it's not going to be deliberate practice towards the known goal, yeah? So,
sure,
that won't be as good.
I think, too, though, like, so, like, for example, if you're a coach who's never gotten to a challenger person, like, but you have, like, say, a network of other coaches you have, and you draw upon none of their information, then, yeah, maybe you could get somebody to challenger, even though you're not challenger yourself, because you're drawing upon other people's information. And so, like, there are people like maybe LS, for example, who's never gotten the, like, top 10 challenger, but he's got, like, that kind of level of gameplay knowledge because of his history with StarCraft, being, top of the ladder StarCraft, plus he talks to Korean pros all the damn time about the game.
Yeah, literally right? So all day, every day, right? So
it's like somebody like him, he has that, that level of credibility just because he's worked with people like that for so long.
Yeah, and he's also, he's successfully scouted and developed players into challenger players. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
is that? But he doesn't want to get the challenger himself. I'd imagine that's probably why.
I think he tries his hardest when there are periods where he tries in ranked and periods where he doesn't try. And when he does try in ranked, he tends to get high master, I think is what I've heard.
Yeah, I've seen him in high master before, like getting really close to challenger.
Yeah, and he's still very unsatisfied with his own performance because his standards are insane. But I mean, like, the thing about it, right, is that, like, he's definitely got the understanding of what it takes. Even if he doesn't spend the time, even if he doesn't condition himself to get to the point where he is able to do it, he knows the road there. You know what I mean? And that is pretty much undeniable at this point. I mean, the results speak for themselves, right?
100%.
So it's yeah. But one of the things that he also says, in the chapter, is something to the effect of, like, if you're just starting out, right, and not to say that everyone is just starting out, but if you're just starting out on your journey of really becoming competitive at the game, right, and maybe you're in silver or in gold or something like that, right, you don't necessarily need the best coach in the world to get you higher, right? Somebody who's platinum or diamond or master is going to be able to have plenty of things that they can tell you that will help tremendously and will allow you to reach the next level of play, right? I think in the thing he says something to the effect of, like, if you feel like you haven't been learning for a while, don't be afraid to find another coach. And I think there's some truth in that, like, don't be afraid to learn from many people, I think. And kind of, see what's out there. Survey the field.
Sort of like what I've been kind of doing, I guess, with a lot of, like, just going around messaging random people, like, hey, you want to give me a coaching lesson? I'll pay you.
Yeah.
And, I mean, honestly, like, that's actually probably why I've improved so fast in a lot of ways, not just joining Royal, but, like, just in general, just being, like, just trying to, get a lot of coaches, and just, even if it's only 1 or 2 lessons, it's still really helpful, I think.
Yeah, you get to encounter other people's different mental models and see what kinds of things they're thinking and incorporate that into your own stuff. Ends up being really good. Yeah. Anything else on that? Finding a good teacher, qualities of a good teacher?
Nah.
So, second section talks about engagement. And kind of the central idea that I kind of picked out is, like, you have to be concentrating and focusing on the practice in order for it to be beneficial, right? And a kind of an important quote that I picked out is, focus and concentration are crucial, I wrote. So shorter training sessions with clearer goals are the best way to develop new skills faster. It's better to train at 100% effort for less time than 70% effort for a longer period. Once you can no longer focus effectively, end the session and make sure you get enough sleep so that you can train with maximum concentration. This has been so
hard
true
to do on League.
It is hard to do on, for sure. But I think that there's a lot of merit to kind of what's being said, right?
Yeah, I agree.
It's like I don't know if, like, either of you remember when you first encountered the idea of, like, trading stance or something, right? Some of the, like, really base level fundamental shit, right? But, like, if you go into a game and you're, like, focusing on that, and you're focusing, like, really hard on doing that, then, like, by the time you finish the game, you are just wiped. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's just, like, absolutely mentally draining, right?
Been there, done that.
Yeah. And, like, I think the thing that this says to me is, like, that feeling is what you're looking for, right? If you don't have that feeling coming out of a practice session, then it may mean that you weren't focusing hard enough. Or it may mean that you already had a lot of what you needed there, and you didn't actually learn much from the practice, right? Maybe you were focusing on it, but it was already mostly in unconscious competence, and you didn't successfully bring it out of that into conscious competence again.
But then again, playing when your focus is slightly off is advocated in the mental game of poker too, in a way to build your resistance, you know, to build increased ability to focus.
For sure. And I think that there is merit in that. To try to kind of marry the models, right?
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
There's, in League and in poker, right? You're part of the performance expectation is that you are able to focus for long periods of time.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But that's a kind of like focusing on the game is a very different thing than focusing on the learning. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Like focusing on playing the game well is and all the various facets of the game that entails. Basically piloting all of the skills that you have in conscious competence to the best of your ability is a very different thing than hyper-focusing on the one thing that you're trying to improve and really digging into that and trying to dissect it and understand it and give yourself good feedback around it and improve that one thing.
Yeah. Yes, but also no. Yes. So no, what I think is that it actually applies to both. So mental game of poker 2, he advocates for playing even when you're feeling like slightly tired, or like when you're feeling like when you're feeling like you should be stopping, then you play one more to find your second win. And I think that there's no reason to not apply that to learning as well.
Okay.
Like even though there would be diminishing returns, right? You wouldn't be learning as well as if you would be on 100%, right? But you still improve in the long run your ability to, well, just your ability to focus. So you can focus more when you're learning the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean?
I don't know. That would be something I'd be interested in kind of exploring. But I think either way, right? Whether you're focusing and then stopping when you feel yourself starting to fall off, or whether you're focusing 100% and then quitting, either way, it starts with 100%.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And if that period of 100% isn't there, that's when you're going to run into problems, right? Like what the in the wording of the quote, right? If you only get to 70% effort because because you're pacing yourself, because you're going to try to go for 2 hours, right? That is going to hurt more than going 100% for 1 hour and then 50% for the next hour. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, I know. And fucking Xmissy just fucking flexed on Lyra, just fucking walking up to him and saying, you don't do that. And Lyra's like, okay, understandable, have a nice day. As a jungler, I respect how fucking hard it is to pull that move from Xmissy.
Got him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Jared Tendler is getting at is about learning how to stay at 100 longer rather than
yeah, it's whether or not there. And you build that by playing at not 100, right?
Yes.
You play that. You build that by playing an extra game, trying to stay at 100.
Yeah. Even though you can't.
Right. But what Peak says is that just don't start for an hour and then expect to be able to play at 100 for 8 hours, right? Like you can't do that.
Yeah.
So Jared is kind of saying the same thing, but I think a big difference is that Jared is explaining that this is how you get yourself to being able to do 8 hours. It's not it's like saying I'm gonna go deadlift 400 pounds or something. You've never deadlifted before. It's like you're gonna break your back, right?
You're right. Yeah.
That's how I took
Yeah, I think that's
Mhm.
a good way to understand it. Mm-hmm.
And so to kind of bring that around to sort of what you were saying earlier, Moravite, about how you feel like it's like super different to be like learning something in League versus doing deliberate practice at work, right? Where do you feel like your level of effort is at when you're doing learning in those two areas?
I don't really feel any difference, really. I mean, like, I think the big difference is that probably at work I have to. Probably at work, I guess I'm not sure.
My word. Team Liquid's player is just
Because I know that I've heard from you in the past, like a lot of kind of different like reports on like how difficult something is to practice and how much effort you feel like you felt like you were able to put in or did put in. And I distinctly remember you hearing you say sometimes that like, oh, like that felt really good and I was able to focus deeply on it, and it's really tough, but I'm like getting there and like able to do it, you know what I mean? And it's exhausting. And then other times I hear you talking about working on stuff, and it sounds like it's just kind of, I don't know. It sounds more passive to me. I don't know whether that's like a my perception thing or whether it's something that's actually happening. So I wonder about it.
In terms of passive, what do you mean?
Just kind of like you. It sounds to me like sometimes you will go into a practice session and like already not be having too much focus on it, or you'll have like trouble with your focus, and as a result you end up like not getting too much out of the practice. Like there will be like it seems like your practice is something that, or not your practice, it seems like your focus is something that has like a wide range at the moment. You know what I mean? Like some days you end up having really good focus, and some days you end up having really bad focus. And on the days that you have really good focus, you're able to get a lot done and you learn a lot. And the days that you don't have good focus, you tend to learn a lot less. And you tend to struggle and feel bad about not getting what you feel like you should be out of your practice, right? And so the kind of question is like, I think in a lot of different scenarios, we've kind of like looked at that. We've been like, okay, the practice isn't working. Let's try a different method. You know what I mean? When instead, we should have been saying something along the lines of like, okay, your focus was bad today. Let's try again on a different day when your focus is better. You know what I mean? And like make sure that we're using, make sure that we're paying attention to how, to like where on your range you're landing in terms of your ability to focus on any given day, and taking that into account when we're evaluating the results of practice. Sure. That's, I think, what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are days where I'm just not necessarily as engaged when I want to be, or when I want to be.
Yeah. And, it's like, we talk about, ADHD, and that, like, makes that difficult, you know what I mean? And it's like, engagement is something that people without ADHD have a pretty easy time turning on or off kind of at will, It's importance based or whatever, right? And then for a more interest based nervous system, it's not something that you have as easy of a time control. And so this may also kind of explain some of the difficulty with learning that people with ADHD may.
We're just like, sometimes there's like we just aren't interested even when we want to be.
Yeah. And if you're not interested and you're not engaged and you're not focused on the practice, then even if you're doing the right thing, right? Even if you're this kind of comes back to that same thing I was saying before about like active ingredient. You remember that talk? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like the active ingredient in the practice is that you are focusing on it. And if you go through the motions but you're not able to focus on it, then you won't get that much benefit from it. And I think that's kind of what he's saying here, but in different words.
Sure.
So that was a thought that I had.
Yeah, I like it.
Slight parenthesis on the TL versus CG game. Holy shit, watching TL play is so fucking impressive.
Pretty good.
Like, their laning, like their ability to fucking track Lyra. God, that must feel awful. He got fucking face checked by Xmissy, then when he's doing his second round of clogs, Impact lands a fucking ward on his face. And
how do you like that play where Xmissy walks in a tower, ults, and then flashes out?
Yeah, what was that dive though? Hello?
Teal's so impressive.
I like
Juggler flashes out of tower.
Doing all this crazy shit that Dilga's like impressed by, and then he just like goes and just ults on the turret and flashes out.
Yeah, and I'm like, I was praising your ass, Xmissy, but now it's just...
I rescind all the praise.
Yeah, no, you go fuck yourself.
Absolute Pepe hands.
I can do that dive too.
You think you're
Too
good?
easy.
I can also go under turret and flash out.
Too easy.
I'm way better than you at throwing into the turret and flashing out.
So the next section was on practicing without a teacher. I found this section absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
Talked at length about Benjamin Franklin and his writing exercises that he did based on articles from a newspaper called The Spectre, which he admired the writing of. So he started with kind of the goal of getting to a point where he felt like he was able to write as well as the people from The Spectre. And in order to try to get closer to doing that, he would take an article, he would write down like hints as to the content of each sentence, and then first he just tried to reproduce the article from the hints using his own wording, and then would reflect and judge against the original article to see whether he had met its standards. And when he did that for a while, he kind of noticed that his biggest issue was his vocabulary. And it wasn't that he didn't know the words, it was that he didn't think of them when writing, right? And so, in order to get better at that, he decided to write down the hints and try to reproduce the article, but try to reproduce the article in verse, doing it as a poem. Which he figured would make him think more carefully about word choice in order to fit the meter of the poem, and that would force him to come into contact with more arcane language more frequently.
Yeah.
That ended up working for him, and so he ended up then moving on to writing structure. And so he would take all of the hints, but then he would actually shuffle the hints up, and each sentence would be out of order. And he would then, before rewriting the article, he would take all of the hints and try to arrange them into a pattern that made sense, and a structure that seemed good. And then he would do his usual thing, and as always, compare to the original and see whether he liked what he had done better than what they had done. As a way of exercising, I think it's absolutely fascinating, and it sounds like super duper effective to me. So
I have actually done a really similar thing because you may or may not know, but I was a lyrics writer for my band when I was in throughout several years, not only high school, so like 6 years.
Okay.
So I used to write a lot of well, not a lot. I used to write poetry.
Yeah.
And at some point I was just fucking okay, I'm just gonna fucking see, like, I'm gonna write a fucking poem, and just for no other reason than because I don't do it often, I'm just gonna be writing this one in fucking, I don't know how it's called in English. The 12 fucking wait, let me translate that.
The iambic decameter.
No, wait. God damn it. So, yeah, it's 12 syllables. Each line, each verse is 12 syllables. Not verse, actually, no. Each line is 12 syllables.
That should be iambic decameter, I think.
But it's
Something
Well,
like that.
iamb is
like
pair
it's
and
only
dec is
classical
10,
French
so.
metrics, so maybe there maybe it doesn't actually fucking translate.
Could be.
Yeah. I mean, but easily one can imagine a form like that. So
No, it's no, Alexandrine, actually, apparently.
Hmm.
I don't know if that computes to you or whatever. So I used to do that, and yeah, generally that shit works.
yeah, you get
But
more
it's
words
like-
in your head. Yeah.
Yeah. But that shit's like easy when the only like variables you control, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't really take a high-low game and just like reproduce what they like, try coming up with the same game plan they do in one of your own games,
Nope.
because you don't have the tools to do that.
The closest that you can get is a lot closer to what he talked about in the last chapter regarding like mammogram practice, right? Where you will do like pause, predict, reflect, and I think.
But I found even that to be hard because like watching is very different from playing.
It's
Well, maybe that's why.
No one said it was easy.
Yeah, like I found it really actually hard to get the same patterns of thought as if I was playing, you know.
Mm-hmm. I would say, developing the ability to do that, to watch a game and think as though you were playing it. I would argue that is a skill. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no argument there.
Yeah, that skill is a requirement for you to then be able to get any kind of benefit out of practicing with pause, predict, reflect in the first place.
So it's a bit of a tangent, but how would you practice that skill? Because I'm thoroughly lacking in that department.
How would you practice the skill of visualizing, of watching a game as though you were playing?
What you would have to do, what I do, is when I'm watching a replay, I actually imagine my muscles moving the way that like I see the mouse moving and stuff, and the buttons I press. And like sometimes you have to play at like a quarter speed, but as you get better at like, for me, it's not visualizing; it's actually feeling.
I think that makes sense. The position of like imagining you're moving your hands, like you're actually inputting the commands on an unplugged keyboard.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, I will do that. I'll unplug my keyboard and I'll unplug my mouse, and I'll try to play along with the player. You know what I mean? And every time, and
that makes sense.
I've said before too that like
what a beast. What a fucking beast, Jensen.
You have situations where like you want to do a thing and then they'll do the exact opposite, and you're like, wait, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah,
and then you have to go back and rewatch it because you're actually just so thrown off.
Happened yet, which is why.
That,
God, Jensen is so good. I'm
for me the like that kind of a situation where you like it feels like lag, right? You know, when you lag out and your character is just like not responding, right? Like that's what it feels like when you're out of sync with the player.
Yeah, I know this exists and I'm not experiencing it. That's why I'm.
You ever play Smash Brothers and you're like trying to control your character and you're looking at the wrong character? And you're like, why the fuck am I doing what I wanted to do? And then you realize, wait, I'm not Fox. I'm
Yes.
Pikachu. And then my Pikachu's like 4 stocks down because I was watching Fox the whole time. Because he was doing the same thing I did for like 15 seconds and then did one thing differently. And then he's like, that's sort of like what it feels like.
Yeah.
Agreed. Same thing when you're playing an FPS on split screen.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, wait, no, I did not shoot that.
Yeah, I know, like, you did literally everything the same up until that moment.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say literally like trying to actually put yourself in a position to try to do the motions is going to be the thing that's going to put you in that mindset the best.
And the thing is that like a lot of people, when they say mental rehearsal, they say like, oh, I just imagine like visualize the champion on the screen and stuff, but really, if you want to get full value out of mental rehearsal, you have to also incorporate body feeling and like other emotions and connections into that as well.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, that makes sense because our brain actually don't make the difference between when you're thinking about moving and when we are actually moving, right?
Yeah, it's just a strength thing.
It's it's
strength
just
of the signal.
The strength of the electrical signal, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I will try that.
Yeah, and that's why I don't like calling it visualization, but mental rehearsal, because it creates a different like meaning in your mind. Because like if you say visualize, you're just imagining.
Yeah, you just think about looking at it.
Right.
But it's more than that. Yeah. So to present a quote, to practice effectively without a teacher, it helps to keep in mind 3 F's. Focus, feedback, fix it. Break the skill down into components that you can do repeatedly and analyze effectively. Determine your weaknesses and figure out ways to address them. And it's like, I don't know, I read that and I'm just like, yeah, just click better, forehead. Like it's like it's a fantastic summary, but it's
we're not learning anything on that part.
Yeah, so general as to be almost.
Well, yeah, I mean, but they can't really give you specific advice.
Yeah, no,
it's like,
but...
so like the way I'm saying is like, okay, if I need to click better forehead, what are the different ways that I move my mouse and click commonly in League of Legends? So this is one of the things that Warren gave me, where he's like, we actually really only use 3 different mouse movements generally in League of Legends. We use a point-to-point for kiting. We use this curved point-to-point for when we're trying to sort of move at someone and dodge skills off at the same time, and then we do a thing where we aim over them and then move our mouse back, so that way we can aim a skill shot, for example, and it's just or do whatever and then click back on the person. There's like 3 different mouse movements, and then what you do is you practice those specific mouse movements outside the game, and then look in the game and be like, all right, what are the situations where I should or want to use specific types of mouse movements, and then incorporate those, right? That's sort of like, I think, what he's getting at.
God, what an absolute slaughter.
Because it's like, when you think about it, I mean, it seems like clicking is such an ambiguous thing, but in reality, there are specifically designed skills that you have to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the way that you move your mouse and the way that you how the distance and all that stuff. So
and all of that, I think,
those things.
Is absolutely beautifully practiced by playing us. You know?
Yeah.
True, and
if you bring it to
moving my mouse down.
If you bring it consciously, definitely. But a lot of people never bring the types of mouse movement they have to their conscious memory. So
wait, can they do it? Oh my God, they can! Oh my! Oh, this is so hot. This is peak League of Legends.
So yeah, it's a good roadmap, but it's difficult to follow, right?
Hello.
Each of these 3 steps, breaking the skill down into components you can do repeatedly and analyze effectively, that's a month. Determine your weaknesses, that's another month, right? Figure out ways to address them, yet another month, right?
No, and when you think you figured out your weaknesses, they have changed also.
Yeah, that too. So there's.
But at that point, it's like you gotta just sit down and try it, right? And then
yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And it's not to say that it's the wrong way to be thinking about it, or that there's a better way to be thinking about it. It's just to say that, like, don't expect it to be as easy as 3 sentences might make it sound, right? Like,
yeah.
That is what you need to do, but just because you can say it, that simply doesn't mean that it's that easy to do.
I don't think he was trying to say it that easy, was he?
Sure. No, I don't think so. I'm just pointing out that, like, it's good but hard,
That's what she said.
Damn it. Plateaus. Trying to do something. A lot of times in the pursuit of a skill, you'll feel like you've gotten basically as good as you can get, and you just don't know what your weaknesses are. You don't know how you can possibly get better. Or you like know what your weaknesses are, but you don't even know how you could possibly work. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
never happened. Never will.
It never happened to anyone ever. The thing that he suggests to try to do is to attempt something significantly more difficult than you've been able to do before, and then see what part of the process breaks down first, right? Let's say you're a player that feels like you've got like a bad reaction time, right? And you have a goal of you want to be able to flash a Malphyte, right? If it's coming at you. But that feels like totally out of reach. Do like a 1v1 against a friend, and just have him fucking Malphyte ult you on cooldown, right? And just try to dodge it, right? And see if you can figure out what's going wrong, right? And, maybe it'll be that your mouse is in the wrong position, maybe it'll be that you didn't predict that it was going to happen, maybe you misjudged the range, there's like all sorts of different things that can go wrong in that particular thing. But trying to dodge it and then seeing what exactly goes wrong can give you a great idea of what exactly is causing you the issue. Perhaps that's not actually the best example. Can you guys think of anything that's like better as an example of like what that might be?
Well, actually, that's the issue with League. Making the situation harder is like kind of weird, because like it's not about making the game harder. You don't want to make like riskier tactical decisions, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, I don't think that's, at least I don't.
Yeah, I think it's more like playing against a significantly better player than you, or a significantly better team.
There are ways to make the game harder on yourself without, like, for example, you can
buy an elo.
You can physiologically change your body to like react as if you're in a high pressure situation. So, like, let's say.
I don't think it's about the pressure, though. I think it's about the actual difficulty of the task.
Yeah, I think.
Well, if you would let me finish, right?
Sure.
Like,
never.
It doesn't change the actual difficulty of the game, but it changes the difficulty of your ability to play the game, right? Because if you're imagining yourself at like World Finals or something, and if you don't win this game, and like your body, like obviously, cognitively you'll know the difference, but your body doesn't necessarily do. So, like, as an example, you can make yourself think that you're in a much harder situation than you actually are, and then try to play through, a high amount of anxiety and fear, right? Mm-hmm. That might be a way to do it, right? And or play against a significantly better opponent, or what Faker does and blow half his mana on his way to lane.
Sure.
Or literally just lose the first 2 waves of EXP, so you're constantly at a level deficit.
Mm-hmm. Certainly something you can try. Just give yourself a deficit and see what happens there.
Faker's done that a lot.
Yeah.
But that's not really making the game harder insofar as like the actual game's harder. It's just putting yourself in a worse situation, so you have to work harder to make better decisions.
If you're like a mid or a top player, I think the easiest possible way to do something like this would be to just like get a 1v1 from a player that's like way better than you, right? If you're trying to work on your laning, right? And if you can see that they're winning against you in the same way every time, you're making the same mistake over and over again, and that's what's costing you your matches, that can help you to identify what your mistake is, right?
Indeed.
It's like you'll get punished for like 10 different things in the elo that you're playing in, because they'll only punish the most important thing 1 out of 10 times, right? But if you play against somebody who's significantly better, they'll punish the same thing 10 times because they see it every time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you'll end up with a very clear idea of, at the very least, something that can be worked on. And the other thing that he talks about is that you actually, a lot of times, you actually end up doing a lot better than you thought you would, right? He talks about Steve Falloon and the digit memorization, right? And I was like, I just don't think I can remember more than 40, right? It's just fucking impossible. I can't get it, but I can't get it right? And he's like, all right, try 60, right? And then he remembers like most of 60, right? And he's like, all right, well, maybe I'm just messing up one or two in the sequence, not necessarily that I just can't remember anything well, it's like, remotely.
It's not that I can't do 40. It's just that like I mess up the memorization of the 39th and 40th number.
Yeah, and then you'll end up in this with the same sort of thing in League, right? You'll just be like, I'm making like fucking 20 different mistakes in lane. It's fucking garbage, right? It's just terrible, right? And then you play against somebody who's like a full skill tier ahead of you, right? And you play like 5 1v1s or something, right? And 4 out of 5, you just like lose half your health at level 1. You know what I mean? And you're just like, well, I mean, I guess it's just my like trade position.
Right, and it's just what I mean? Oh, if I fix this mistake at level 1, they go into games fixed at level 1, and then none of those other mistakes happen because those other mistakes arose out of the level 1.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you're just in a completely different situation than you would have otherwise been.
So also, really solidifies the argument that like, really, you shouldn't be aiming to fix 15-minute mistakes until you know that you're not making any mistakes in the first 15 minutes. Where it's like, if you make a mistake at level 1, right, it's going to affect the way you play the rest of the game. So it usually makes Pareto principle sense to try to fix the level 1 mistake before you go and fix the other mistakes, because chances are the level 1 mistake might have caused a cascading effect, right?
Yeah. There's definitely an element of that. I think there's also an element that has to be tempered by, though. It's like it's like if you're making like 4 minor mistakes during the beginning phase, right? But then you like hard int in mid game no matter what, right? I would rather have somebody.
Well, that's a different situation, though. I think, right? Like,
if you're stuck, then yeah, I think generally working on the early game is going to be the best thing, right? But if there's very clearly something that's going horribly wrong in a different area of the game, it's not like you should just never worry at all about the later stages of the game just because compounding advantage exists. There will always be games, if you're playing against people that are close to your skill level, where you do fine in lane and games where you do poorly in lane. And so mid to late game skills tend to be not as important, but still definitely some important.
Yeah.
It can still be corrected for some. But yeah, definitely agreed as a rule of thumb. Early mistakes are because of that cascading effect, early mistakes are much more impactful to fix than late game mistakes. Yeah. So, other than that, was there anything else in the plateaus section that seemed interesting?
Nope.
I think that was basically it, yeah. So the final section is maintaining motivation. Okay. The authors talk about that willpower isn't genetic. It stems from your motivation. They say that they'll talk kind of more about that in some later chapters. And the mental model that they have for how motivation works is that it comes down to reasons to keep going and reasons to quit. And the way that you improve your motivation is either strengthen the reasons to keep going or weaken the reasons to quit. Seems pretty legit to me, They talk about scheduling practice sessions ahead of time to reduce the strain of trying to kind of find time in your week to do it. If you have to not only suffer through the grind of deliberate practice, but also suffer through the grind of each week trying to figure out what are you going to cut, what are you going to cut, what are you going to cut, then that's a lot harder than just saying every week at this exact time this is going to happen. You know, it takes the weight off of your mind of scheduling stuff and figuring out what your schedule is going to be. You schedule it ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about removing known distractions, right? Like if you're somebody that checks your phone all the time, put your phone in a different room. You are somebody that, you know, just like really can't help going and playing a different game if you're on your computer and you're trying to work on League, right? It's not exactly like the easiest thing to deal with, but just like, you know, uninstall all the other games. You know what I mean? Like make it easier for yourself to not have that kind of a distraction. They say to stay healthy, get enough sleep, and eat well, etc., etc. Because physical health will affect your ability to focus for long periods.
I'll be right back, restroom.
Gotcha. They say limit the length of practice sessions to about an hour. And if you do want to practice more, do an hour and then take a break. You know, don't go all the way all the time. They say to use the skill itself as part of your motivation. Once it becomes part of your identity, think of practice as an investment rather than an expense. This is really dangerous. You know, I think this whole kind of section is a little interesting, a little uninformed, compared to the approach that the mental game of poker takes on motivation, which I think I much prefer, and I think it does a better job of going into the details of exactly all this stuff. The thing that I do think is important here, though, is this second to last. These last three that talks about here. Number one, believing that you can succeed. If you feel like you've taken a step back and that there's no way that you'll ever get to where you want to be because you've gotten so much worse, then commit to instead getting back to feeling like you're as good as you were at your best, or even getting past that before quitting, right? And if even at that point, after you've gotten past the difficulty of going through the period where you were plateaued and where you felt like you weren't making progress and couldn't get anywhere, and then you still want to quit, you probably should quit. But if you only feel bad when you're not making progress, maybe you should keep going. The second point that he brings up is that it's a really good idea to surround yourself with people who encourage and support and challenge you in your endeavors. Ben Franklin founded the Junto, a club for advancing intellectual thought where each member was expected to bring an interesting topic of conversation to each meeting, and these topics were to be discussed in the group, quote, in the sincere spirit of inquiry after truth, without fondness for dispute or desire of victory. And I thought that was a fantastic way to word that particular. So I had to include it. It's just so good, right? Like, talk about like a way to kind of sum up the way that I'd like discussions to happen on Royal, yeah? You know?
Yep.
Like,
Yep. That's how it feels indeed.
So it's really, really good. And then the very last and very important point. Set short-term goals and celebrate each time that you succeed at these short-term goals. Because every time you kind of breadcrumb yourself into that, it's going to help a lot.
Yes.
So
I don't find this section to be like, doesn't feel like really personally relevant to me, so it doesn't feel that enlightening.
This chapter was kind of a dud, honestly.
Yes.
Just wasn't a whole lot here.
Yeah.
A lot of reminders and anecdotes and stuff that's kind of already been talked about. But...
yeah, like the fact that we three are here talking about this book, like, is a testimony that like the motivation part, we've got that shit kind of figured out.
Yeah, I'd agree.
It's really hard to write a 400-page book and not rehash some materials. I
agree.
Especially when it comes to like a self-help book kind of like this, where it's like it's a lot less about how much material you put in it, but like how many different ways you repeat it so it sticks better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
And these are
definitely
all
not
points
faulting
that
the
are
authors.
very well worth repeating, but I think we've kind of already talked them to death in terms of
yeah, we've
what they
also
mean
talked
and
a
all that.
lot.
So,
I'd imagine that with the book club, the first couple of chapters for books like these would always take the longest, and then as we move on, they'll get quicker and quicker.
Yeah, seems reasonable to me. So, although there wasn't a huge amount to talk over this week, what kinds of things
Wait, is that the end of the chapter?
That's
Fuck.
literally the end of the chapter. We've only
Jeez,
been here an
I was
hour.
not prepared.
Yeah, so it's a short one this week, for sure. There really just isn't a whole lot to talk about. So, yeah, like I said, it's been a short one. Are you taking anything out of it at all?
The discussion on engagement in like focus in learning.
I think I'm gonna try that. Like I keep looking for more ways to stay interested. But one of the ways I could probably stay interested is by not just looking to play the game, but also looking to inject challenge into the game through. You know what? I'm gonna practice harassing this game, and you know how I'm gonna do that? I'm gonna literally not use any spells at all for the first 10 minutes of the game.
Got him.
Boom. Right? Where it's like, yeah, sure, that's not the best way to play the damn game, but like, if the only way I can interact with my enemy champion or the minions is by only allowing myself to auto attack, then I'm going to be looking for the spets so I can actually do that without getting completely dumpstered because they have the spells, right? So it's like, I actually think that's a really good idea to think about things like that. Like, with that one Katarina player who told himself that he would play a lane without using his mouse or his keyboard, and like hard destroyed a gold player or something.
What?
Like 4 years, it was like 4 years ago. He just played a game without his keyboard and it's dumpstered everybody. So much better.
With just right clicks?
It was something ridiculous like that I laughed at him for, and then I actually watched the video and it was ridiculous. I'll have to try to find it.
What it reminds me a lot of actually is there was that I don't know whether you watched it or not. It was like a like show match between rioters versus pros, right? And the pros decided to literally only level one ability, and then they won. It was disgusting.
Yeah, shit like that, where it's like you just make the game unnecessarily hard on yourself just to practice it, and it's like maybe you wouldn't want to do that in a ranked game, but like I could totally see going into a normal game and then just be like, I'm not leveling any fucking skills. I don't care.
Yeah. It certainly will be
tough.
tough.
Yeah, if you want to learn how to kite with Ash, yeah, I can see that working.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and I think not only does it make it harder, it also makes it simpler. You know what I mean? You're saying I'm not even going to worry about spells. I'm not going to worry about doing that. It's auto attacks only. That's my aesthetic today.
Or it's like, oh, I'm only going to auto attack if I'm at max range. Like if I'm closer to them, then I'm not allowed to do that. I have to walk away first, and then I can auto. And then that way you really like hammer down the spacing and stuff, and it's like I'm starting to really see the value, and like there are ways that you can actually make the game harder on yourself through doing stupid shit like that. Even though we'd say that there isn't really, but I think that's because we're trapped in this box of, oh, if we're playing the game, we must play it properly.
Yeah, and you have to play to win. Yeah, and that's just not true, right? You know, when you're doing deliberate practice, the idea is not to perform well. The idea is to learn something. And so the measure of whether or not you have succeeded is not whether the game ends in a victory or defeat. It's whether or not you actually built any skill.
And on top of that, like it's hard because you look at 9 other players in the game. Those 9 other players are going to look at you and say, Ash, we're level 16 and you've never even ulted.
You've never done anything. What are you doing? So, here's an idea. Here's an idea. If you want to be doing these sorts of things, it might be a good idea to put together a 5-stack. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that nobody else is conflicting with the goals that you want to be doing. You know.
Or like at the same time, just mute everybody, right? Because like,
yeah, if you don't have a F5 stack, then obviously muting is.
So it's like,
the way that
sure, like, yeah, sure, you lost from that one game, but
you might get reported for intentionally feeding. Let's be real here, right? So.
Well, I don't know if you'd really get punished unless you're like actually just legitimately entering, right? But it's like I don't know if it's really considered trolling or griefing to not use your ultimate, right? Like,
I think it probably is. I would say that's probably punishable.
Yes, I would agree.
Like I say, I think the safest way to do it would be to get together a 5 stack.
Sure, but like, I think that I'm gonna try stuff like that.
Sure.
Maybe I won't go like, oh, I'm gonna spend the whole game not doing anything, right? But like maybe like the first 5 minutes or something.
Yeah, that's I think more reasonable, right? Yeah.
Which would have been the goal, right? Because like I think 5 minutes of really hard, deliberate practice like that's probably enough for a specific game.
Mm-hmm. Seems right to me. Yeah. Seems really sick.
And then there's obviously like the I'm just gonna blow my flash at level 1, so I'd have to spend the first 5 minutes waiting for like looking out for a gank or something. Force yourself to be more aware. But like, I don't have a flash. Now I have to play carefully, or I will only flash if the jungler ganks or some other bullshit, right? So it's like forcing yourself to have to. Yeah. But there are little objectives that you can do with yourself with that. Like I think that's there's probably a lot more than we think there are.
Yeah. And it further drives home the point that I've been ragging on for 3 weeks now, right? Which is separating practice and performance activities. And understanding that, to get the best practice, you will not be performing at your peak. And that's not only okay, that's like required, actually.
Yeah, I might actually try the whole just only auto attack for the first 5 minutes and then try to like.
It sounds fascinating, honestly.
Yeah. Because like now it's like
and on a champion like Caitlyn or something, like that's pretty legit,
Or like make yourself play Lucian or something.
Oh god, Lucian with no abilities sounds absolutely horrifyingly bad.
Yeah, imagine how good at spacing you'd have to be able to make that work, and then go on to Caitlyn, and then you're just like fucking faker at Caitlyn. Like
I might go for the opposite order, right? Get it to the point where you can do it consistently on Caitlyn, then get it to the point where you can consistently do it on Lucian. Progressive resistance.
Yeah, I mean both approaches have their merits, right? Where it's like with one approach you see how hard it is at the start, with the other one you're like, okay,
yeah,
I'm glad you're really adding it on. So it's like I think different people advocate different approaches. Like I have a piano teacher who's like, no, you start really slow and you speed up. Another piano teacher is like, no, just like make it harder on yourself by like doubling the tempo, or like making it so like, or making it so you have to say a certain syllable whenever you hit an A or something. Or it's like when you don't have to do that to yourself anymore, then it's really easy.
I don't know. I hate it. That's awful. I hate you for suggesting
I actually really like both methods. I think doing both is actually really good.
Oh yeah, I definitely think they work. I just fucking hate practicing like that. It's so painful.
I think that the practices that we hate doing the most are probably the ones that are most fruitful.
Where are you weakest, Mr. Dilga?
Shut your whole mouth.
Dilga's not weak at anything.
No.
Dilga's big, strong man.
No, I'm weak at all the things.
Pro player in waiting, by the way.
Dilga is going to be Fnatic's jungler next year, mark my words.
Damn right.
Well, for that I would need to knock Broxah the fuck out, which is unrealistic considering how buff that guy is.
Yeah, you'd have to fucking fight him, just give him a fist fight with him.
Just slip laxatives in his morning oat.
We don't actually try you out by playing League. We determine how good you are at League by seeing how hard you can beat Broxah in a fight.
I'd pay to watch that. I'd pay $14.99 for 2 splits of watching that.
Fucking got me.
Player perspective, by the way.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
see,
so-
like, you watch Brox on ProView, and then suddenly you see me bashing his skull on the keyboard and taking his spot.
One of the things that I started doing with the bounce, what is it called? The bounce hit method that Timothy Galway recommends.
Mhm.
Started doing that in Practice Tool a while ago, and I found that really helped me with working on not canceling so many autos early. Where I'd be like auto click, something like that, or blah blah, or like yang yang, or whatever syllables.
Yeah. Beat.
Yeah, I found that the timing with that way was really easy to do for low attack speed, but by the time I got to like 1.5 attacks, it was like blah 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 blah, and I'm like, this isn't helpful anymore.
Yeah. No, very much agreed. And the thing too is that once you get higher and higher attack speeds, canceling perfectly matters less and less. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Well, I don't know. I guess it depends on the frequency or how bad they are. Because it's if you miss one auto in a sequence of 10, maybe that's not a big deal. But if it's to the point where it's you're sluggish on every single auto, at one point your 10 becomes 8, right, or 9, and it's then you just miss out a whole 150, 200 damage.
Yeah, certainly that's not good.
But I think that you're right, as in that canceling specifically one auto is fine, but as long as you're chaining the rest of them properly, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you see in my autos early where it's they're super sluggish sometimes, and it's I'm actually missing an auto or two in every trade because of it, and that's really bad.
Or you're trying to auto before your auto is actually up and missing 50 to 100 range of movement.
Right. Oh yeah, and then I just stop for a quarter of a second, and I'm like, fuck me.
Got him.
Yeah.
By the way,
I'm...
fun story. I actually did that literally every single time that I ganked as Graves for the first 300 games that I played Graves. And I was like, why can't I gank on Graves? Why can't I chase people? I don't understand. And then finally I just understood I'm just clicking and he's just sitting there and I'm literally losing movement. And I focused on it for 10 games. And I was like, oh my god, Graves can gank. I don't need to just farm my camps anymore. It's amazing.
Dude, I fucking hate Graves' auto attacks.
It's so bad. So hard.
I want old Graves back.
Yeah.
I
Graves
have
has
seen
such a nice
things
auto.
that I was not prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm linking it in the memes channel. And
It's not okay. Oh, okay, never mind, it's okay.
Well, I mean, Tom Holland is fucking hot.
Yeah, what a hot man, what the fuck?
Jesus Christ, he's so fucking good.
Yeah, I
I
think
didn't even realize that was Tom Holland.
Yeah, me neither. It took me a while.
I think the plateaus is the thing that I'm taking the most out of it.
Casually keeping.
Anderson just not even
I'm not gonna acknowledge
acknowledging Tom Holland.
No, that's not a thing.
That's actually, Jesus, dude, what a talented guy.
Yeah, Tom Holland or Sam? Yeah, both. Okay.
Yeah, both 100%.
Inclusive
I'm ending
all.
this stream. Get me out of here. Fucking